Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're diving into something that honestly is really tough to talk about, but absolutely crucial that we do: India's dowry crisis. We're unpacking the brand new 2024 National Crime Records Bureau, or NCRB, data. Our goal today is to look past the tragic headlines you see in the news and really grasp the true scale, the geography, and the deeply entrenched systems driving this crisis.
But before we even look at a single number, it is absolutely vital that we ground this data in reality. The numbers we're about to explore, they represent real people. Just recently, we saw the heartbreaking deaths of Twisha Sharma, a Noida resident who lost her life at her marital home in Bhopal, and Deepika Nagar over in Greater Noida. These stories sparked immense, completely justified public outrage. But as the official data shows us, these high-profile cases are tragically not isolated incidents at all. They are symptoms of a much, much larger pattern.
Okay, let's dive into this jarring reality. When you take all the numbers reported across the entire country and aggregate them, it boils down to an inescapable, devastating metric. A dowry-related death occurs in India literally every 90 minutes. I mean, just think about that. Despite the public outrage, despite the constant media coverage following cases like the ones we just mentioned, the clock is just constantly ticking on this issue. Every single hour and a half, another life is lost. To understand exactly how we got to that metric, let's look at the national trend and examine a decade of data. Here is what the NCRB data is telling us over the past 10 years. If we look back at 2015, the country recorded over 7,600 dowry deaths. Fast forward to this 2024 data, and that number sits at 5,737. So, the total number has dropped by nearly 1,900 cases over the last decade. Now, you might look at that downward trend and think, well, that's a positive sign, right? And sure, on the surface it is. But we have to be incredibly careful not to let this decrease mask the reality of the crisis we're still facing. So the crucial point is this. When you take those 5,737 annual deaths from 2024 and actually break them down, it still translates into more than 15 women losing their lives every single day across the country. A downward trend over a decade is a step in the right direction, for sure. But when you have more than 15 lives being extinguished daily, that clearly shows the problem remains at an incredibly massive systemic scale.
And this violence isn't spread evenly. Let's move to our regional hotspots and see exactly where this crisis is concentrated.
When you break down the 2024 dowry deaths state by state, the disparity is honestly staggering. Just look at Uttar Pradesh. UP alone reported 2,038 cases. Think about that. Out of the roughly 5,700 cases nationwide, Uttar Pradesh accounts for over a third of them. They heavily outpace other high-reporting states like Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, and West Bengal. It becomes incredibly clear that this violence is deeply embedded in very specific geographic zones.
But the fatalities are really just the tip of the iceberg. Let's look beyond the fatalities and uncover what's underneath.
We have to clarify a pretty dark distinction that the NCRB data makes here. The broader category of dowry deaths includes a range of causes, things like suicides or other unnatural deaths that are directly linked to ongoing harassment. But the data also specifically isolates cases classified as dowry murders. This points to something very specific: instances where a dowry dispute escalates into direct, physical, and fatal violence.
And this brilliantly illustrates a grim nuance in how the data breaks down by region. When we zero in on direct dowry murders, the geographic hotspots actually shift. While Uttar Pradesh leads in total dowry deaths, West Bengal tops the list for direct dowry murders with 163 cases in 2024. They're closely followed by Odisha with 161 cases and Rajasthan with 75. It's a critical distinction in the data that shows us exactly where harassment most frequently escalates into direct fatal violence.
But remember that iceberg metaphor we used? Fatalities are just the visible peak. To understand the true scale of what we're dealing with, we have to look at the massive base of the iceberg. In 2024 alone, India recorded over 1.2 lakh, that's more than 120,000, registered cases of cruelty by husbands and their relatives. This is a staggering figure. And what's deeply concerning is that this annual number has consistently remained above the 100,000 mark for the entire last decade. It represents a massive submerged system of daily ongoing harassment.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the geographic overlap. Look at the states leading in these cruelty cases. Uttar Pradesh has over 21,000 and West Bengal has over 19,000. Notice something? These regions overlap almost perfectly with the states reporting high numbers of dowry deaths and murders. Then you have Rajasthan, Maharashtra, and Telangana all recording more than 10,000 cases each. The data absolutely proves a sustained underlying pattern. The extreme outcomes, the deaths, are born from this incredibly broad environment of sustained harassment.
Let's move to and see how this builds into the final, critical piece of the puzzle, a stalled justice system and the legal bottleneck. Because you see, it's not just about the sheer volume of these crimes, it's about what happens after a victim actually goes to the police. In 2024, a massive 37% of cases filed under the Dowry Prohibition Act were currently sitting as pending. And this isn't just a bad year. The NCRB data reveals that over the years, the pendency rate consistently stays between 30% and 40%. This means a remarkably huge share of police cases remain entirely unresolved. It creates a systemic bottleneck where complaints simply do not get timely closure. Which leaves us with this final, highly provocative thought. With 37% of cases currently stuck in limbo, when will victims and their families ever see timely closure? As we've seen from all the data today, while the national death statistic might have declined slightly over the past decade, that drop means absolutely nothing to the more than 15 families grieving every single day. The data clearly shows that without an efficient, functional path to justice to clear out this massive backlog, the cycle of violence and harassment remains completely unchecked. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really encourage you to reflect on what these numbers truly represent in the real world.